So just the other day, I came across a Reddit post that said that you should not become a Singapore citizen unless you want to work until you die. While the original post was deleted, copies of it are still floating around online. In the post, the author mentions that the cost of living in Singapore is high and keeps rising. Because of that, Singaporeans are forced to work for their entire lives. In contrast, he feels that Malaysia is a much better place to live. Now, this argument is not new, and I've seen many similar posts before. For example, there was one post a few years ago that claimed that the average Singaporean would have to work for their entire life. Then there was another one that said that Singapore is a place to work but not a place to live. So in this video, I wanted to respond to all of that. Now let's start with the biggest claim of them all, which is that Singaporeans are forced to work until they die. For this, I would argue that this is largely untrue. And the main reason for that is CPF. Personally, I think that CPF is one of the best policies to be ever introduced by the Singapore government. And that's because it helps to ensure that Singaporeans are financially well supported during their old age. Not just that, it is also designed to provide you with a stable money income for as long as you live. Now, of course, the catch is that in order for this to work, you first need to accumulate enough money in your CPF, which is also known as the full retirement sum. Once this amount is reached, CPF Life would then start giving you a monthly payout at age 65 and onwards. And these payouts are generally sufficient to cover your basic living expenses during your retirement. Now, contrary to popular belief, the full retirement sum is not an unrealistic target for most working adults. For example, if you're earning $4,000 a month, which is below the current median starting salary of fresh graduates, and receiving a modest salary increment of 3% a year, you will still be able to reach the full retirement sum by the age of 55. Now, I know that not all Singaporeans earn $4,000, and this example does not account for CPF usage for housing. However, even if I use a much more conservative estimate, the conclusion is the same. For example, if I start with a $3,000 pay, and if I just make CPF top-ups of $8,000 a year for just 4 years at the beginning of my career, even without any further top-ups afterwards, I will still be able to reach the full retirement sum by 55. What this shows is that the idea that Singaporeans must work until they die does not hold true for the majority of the population, because for many people, CPF already helps to take care of that. And this does not even take into account personal savings, investments, or property, which can all be used to further support retirement if needed. On top of that, there are also many other schemes available to provide additional help. For example, the Supplementary Retirement Scheme, which allows individuals to reduce their taxes while investing for retirement, or the Matched Retirement Savings Scheme and the Matched Medisave Scheme, which provide dollar-for-dollar top-ups for eligible individuals. Then there's also the housing-related schemes, such as the Silver Housing Bonus Scheme and the Lease Buyback Scheme, which also allows homeowners to unlock parts of their housing value to further fund retirements. What this shows is that while Singapore is not a country where the government simply spoon-feed you, it is a country that has many tools available to help you out if you are willing to take responsibility for your own future. Happy Chinese New Year! Get up to $1,888 in rewards when you open an account with Poems by Philip Capital. To make sure you qualify, take Smart Park opt-in during the sign-up process. From there, depending on how much funds you deposit into your accounts, you will earn corresponding welcome gifts. For example, if you fund a minimum of $1,000 within 14 days and keep the funds in the accounts for 30 consecutive days, you will receive a $10 stock coupon. But if you fund at least $20,000 while executing at least 5 trades, the reward increases to $250. Additionally, the first 50 people who open their Poems accounts on a Tuesday will also receive an additional $50 stock coupon corresponding to the company for that week of sign-up. For example, signing up in the second week of the promotion will qualify the customer for one $50 P&G stock coupon, whereas another customer who opens the accounts in the third week will receive a $50 Microsoft stock coupon. This is on top of the $0 US commission for 30 days reward when you fulfill the terms and conditions. So if you are interested, you can sign up with my link down below. Now, despite this, there are still many people who feel that Singapore is a difficult place to live in, and they feel that their daily lives is simply too expensive. Housing costs are too high, food prices are rising, transport costs are going up, and as a result, they feel that they are constantly struggling just to get by. In fact, Singapore is often ranked as one of the most expensive cities in the world to live in. However, what many of these rankings fail to point out is the fact that they are usually based on the cost of living for expats and not locals. So if you look at a study which adjusts for local consumption patterns instead, Singapore's cost of living ranking would drop significantly. And that's because Singaporeans have access to public housing, subsidized healthcare, cheap education, affordable transport, as well as low-cost food options. Or in other words, Singapore can be an expensive place if you live like an expat, where you go for private housing, send your kids to international schools, and often take private transport. But it can also be an affordable place if you live like a local. Now again, this does not mean that all Singaporeans earn high incomes. So let's consider a more realistic scenario. Let's say you graduate from a poly with a diploma in arts, media, or science, which are among the lower paying fields. Your median starting salary is around $2,700. Is that enough to live comfortably in Singapore? Depending on who you ask, the answer may vary greatly. For example, based on a survey from the answer.sg, almost 1/3 of the respondents say that they need around $3,000 to $4,000 to live comfortably, whereas in a street survey, some said that they need $10,000 instead. However, if we look at the official statistics, individuals in the 25th percentile, aka someone who's earning $2,700, would spend around $1,400 a month on average. This suggests that it is entirely possible to live on a 2.7k salary. But of course, whether it is comfortable or not would largely depend on your personal lifestyle. For example, if you are someone who travels frequently, only eats at restaurants, and grab here, grab there every day, then obviously you will find it not enough. But on the other hand, if you are someone who mostly eats at hawker centers, uses public transport, and takes occasional regional trips, then this 2.7k may be more than enough. Now, one important point is that even if you have a low starting pay, it is not a permanent condition, as there are many ways to increase your income over time. One of the fastest ways to do that is to simply ask for a pay raise. While this may sound uncomfortable, studies show that employees who ask for a pay raise are far more likely to receive one as compared to those who don't. Now, of course, you can't just randomly go and ask your boss for a pay raise just like that. If you want to increase the chances of success, you need to build a strong case as to why you deserve the raise. For example, you need to do market research on how much your market value is, document quantifiable results on how you directly benefited your company, such as revenue impact, cost savings, time savings, and client results, as well as prepare for the face-to-face meeting itself. But if that doesn't work, another method is just to change job law. In general, whenever you change jobs, you can expect to see a salary increase of around 5% to 20%. This is way higher than the usual 3 to 6% that you would normally get if you just stay at your current job. Now, some people might push back and argue that it's often better to stay at your current job as it shows loyalty. But I would say that staying in one position for too long can also limit both your income growth and career development. So you have to decide for yourself whether it is really worth staying at a job for too long or not. Besides that, another slower but much more proven method is to get a higher education. That's because data consistently shows that degree holders can earn significantly more than diploma holders, and this isn't limited to just the first job. This gap can persist throughout your entire career because higher qualifications can often lead to better starting positions, faster promotions, and access to higher paying roles. Other than your career, Singapore also offers a ton of opportunities if you want to earn even more money. This can include tuition, freelance work, delivery services, and online businesses. And with the rise of digital platforms, content creation and social media have also become viable income sources as long as you are willing to try. Someone once said this: the difference between successful people and unsuccessful ones is often what they do between 6 p.m. and 12 midnight. From 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., you build your career. From 6 p.m. to midnight, you build your future. While most people use these hours to Netflix and chill, the successful ones tend to use them more for education, health, and personal growth. Now, even if a person earns well and manages their expenses carefully, saving alone is still not enough. If you truly want to break out of the rat race, you need to invest your money. Because if you are saving your way till retirement, you are playing the game the hard way. And that's because of inflation. The value of your money today will be worth a lot less in the future. Take for example, here I have $50. How much do you think this $50 would be worth next year? Singapore's long-term average inflation rate is around 1.7% to 2.1%. But let's just use 2%. What this means is that by next year, this $50 would be worth $49. And we have already seen this and even kaupu about this happening. For example, a plate of char kway teow my ham back then would only cost $3.80. But just 4 years later, it already costs $4.50. Same for a plate of fishball noodles, chicken rice, and even our favorite chai fan, which all went up in price. And that's just over 4 years. Just think about what this would mean for your savings 40 years from now. So let's say you are saving $2,000 a month over 40 years with a 2% inflation, while you have saved $960,000. In reality, that pile of cash is only worth $665,000 in today's value. Or in other words, by the time you retire, you would have lost more than 30% of your money in real value due to inflation. And that's where investing comes in. With investing, you give your money the best chance of growing faster than inflation. And yes, I know that investing looks scary with all its ups and downs. But despite all this, investing in the stock market has produced positive returns over the long term. I find this chart by Vanguard very useful in explaining this. What this shows is the distribution of returns over time. If you hold cash and park it in high interest accounts or fixed deposit, whether it is a short term or long term, you could expect the returns to be roughly the same at around 3% a year. In contrast, stocks deliver much higher average returns of around 9.5% per year over shorter time horizons. However, these returns come with greater volatility, and there are periods where investors lose money. And this is the uncertainty that discourages many people from investing. But when we look at longer time horizons, the stock market has consistently shown positive returns, and the probability of experiencing a loss declines significantly. Now, of course, while this is true in the past, I can't promise you that if you invest today, you will definitely get a positive return in the future. But what we do know is that if you just stick to keeping your money as just cash and bonds, it is almost guaranteed to lose value to inflation. In contrast, investing in the stock market often offers the best chance of preserving and growing wealth over time. Last but not least, I think it is important to manage our expectations. I think one of the biggest reasons we feel unhappy and stressed is because we are constantly comparing ourselves to other people. When we see other people eating well, traveling overseas, staying in a nice condo, we might feel that we are falling behind our peers, even when we are in a relatively good position. In the original post, the author argued that Malaysians enjoy more freedom because they have larger home space for backyard farming and the option to return to kampung life if they dislike city living. In contrast, Singaporeans are seen as trapped in small HDB flats with limited choices. I don't know about you, but if you have stayed in HDBs before, you would have seen all the aunties and uncles planting their stuff in front of their house. In many neighborhoods, there are even organized gardening groups where you can grow your own produce together. As for moving to the kampung to live, sure, you can argue that in Singapore, everything is expensive. But we know from studies that food in Singapore can be cheaper in some places, especially in more outskirts area. This is the same for housing, where a house in Marsiling would be cheaper than a house in Bishan. And even if you genuinely prefer to live elsewhere, there's nothing to stop you from achieving it. There are so many examples of Singaporeans who have moved overseas to live and work, such as Thailand, Bali, Japan, and Korea, and some even do it with their families. This suggests that geography is rarely the real constraint, but rather it is all psychological, where you assume that change is impossible. So it's really a matter of how willing you are to move, because if the why is strong enough, the how becomes easy. One of the things that I've learned along the way is that true happiness doesn't come from having a high income or having a nice home, but rather true happiness is simply the reality minus expectations. Someone living a modest life in the kampung can be just as happy as someone living in Singapore, not because of land size or lifestyle differences, but because they are content with what they have. In contrast, a person living in a wealthy city can always be dissatisfied if the expectations are always higher than their reality. In short, I don't believe that Singaporeans are forced to work until they die. If you believe that, you need to be careful because it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You will go online, complain to everyone about how sucky your life is and how other people have it better. And in a sense, you will be right about that. However, if you believe that you can improve your life and you can make it happen, you are right too, because those who think they can do it are often the ones who do.